Spouse fell for a crypto investment scam, lost our savings, and now we're drowning in debt, struggling to survive. Late last year, I was not doing well, mentally speaking. My spouse had just gone through some stuff themselves, and we were just moping and not being kind to each other. I said some things that lead them to believe I was exploring the idea of leaving them. I wasn't, I was actually implying that I was afraid they would leave me. This misunderstanding and general bad vibes compelled my spouse to seek advice from people on social media. One such friend posed as a financial advisor at an investment firm and suggested my spouse invest jointly in some sort of diversified asset portfolio. My spouse did so by liquidating a savings account they had from before we got married. I had no knowledge any of this was happening, as I was busy dealing with my own life spontaneously combusting and trying to get back on my feet, and, generally being a sad sack. This investment had to be made in crypto. Of course. My spouse has been subject to multiple rants from me that crypto is a pyramid scheme, worse than a meme stock, because at least those are insured. So my spouse was somehow assured that the whole thing was legit because only the transfers had to be made in crypto. The rest was put into an account and could be seen in USD by logging into a website, with posted transaction history and dividends. A couple of months pass, and the investment has basically quadrupled in value. The friend entices my spouse to upgrade the account. This is where my spouse begins to draw from our joint accounts, joint savings, and the proceeds we recently got from the sale of our last house. Of course, the friend knew about the fact that we had massive proceeds from a real estate sale, because my spouse told them. When we sold it, my spouse and I explicitly agreed to roll those proceeds into our current mortgage to reduce our payments by a substantial amount, which would make us much better off financially. At this time, as a result of my issues going away and the sale of that house, which had taken forever, I had gotten my act together and was noticeably happier. Still, for whatever reason, my spouse persisted in hiding that they did something different with the proceeds from me. I was still completely in the dark. Of course, this new input supposedly paid off, and the website reflected even better dividends. My spouse claims that they thought it was legit because of how crypto was going nuts at the time. Of course, had my spouse checked in with me at any time, I would have immediately clocked it as a scam from day one. So now comes the real mess. My spouse attempts to close out the investment account. In come the fees and taxes and whatnot. I'm still sitting there, happy as can be, thinking of how nice it will be now that I've gotten back on my feet to also refinance my stupid mortgage and have money to finally enjoy buying nice things we have been putting off. Of course, all our savings, proceeds, and retirement are gone at this time. So my spouse goes, hat in hand, to their family, who loan them basically an entire master's degree of student loans worth of money. Spouse converts it all to crypto, as per usual, and away it goes, into the black hole of fraud, while I blissfully remain completely ignorant, like a total moron. Now the spouse puts in withdrawal requests. They get my spouse's ID, account numbers, you name it. New fees pop up, new loans are made. Chuck them all in the pile, why not? After a couple of months of delays, moving money around to different banks, yes, they had multi-factor logins, account histories, and all sorts of nonsense too. Make it look legit, the spouse starts to get the family coming knocking, asking for payment before they're hit with taxes. Of course the in-laws did not tell me any of this, so they're all on my shit list as well, for being complete morons, not figuring out it was a scam, and not once thinking that they should ask my spouse if they had permission from me to borrow 6 figures. So the spouse goes to an actual friend, mentions what's going on, and the actual friend, bless them, clues in the spouse that it sounds fishy. Thus, Valentine's Day weekend, lucky me, the spouse details the whole sordid thing. Spouse didn't know it was a scam until they started telling me. I clocked it immediately. Through drips and dribbles, I get the damage. It's gone. All of it. Our entire savings. And we're in substantial debt. Our net worth before this was creeping up towards 1 million. Now it's 6 figures in the red. I'm honestly still in shock. My friends wonder why I haven't filed for divorce. Probably because all that would accomplish is losing the one thing we have left, as we would have to sell the house. I've forced my spouse into marital counseling, and we will be executing papers to make sure the debts are not owned by me jointly, but just my spouse. We're putting the assets in my name. If I leave, I lose the house and walk away with a massive IOU. But my spouse? They'd be most of the way to $1 million in debt to me, because of this. I don't know if I have the heart to do that, since none of this was malicious, it was just really, really fucking stupid. And dishonest. But mostly fucking stupid. Yes, I've been forcing the spouse to report it all to law enforcement. Of course the spouse freaked out when I immediately clocked it as fraud and went on a rant, not kindly, about how my life's savings are probably right now financing terrorists who sex traffic teenagers or some other dodgy bullshit. Yes, I know it's probably all gone and I'm not getting any of it back. Anyway, that's that. I wanted to share to remind you all that some knowledge can be much deadlier than none. My spouse is educated, as am I, and we've done well for ourselves through former investments that have paid off. That led my spouse to complacency and faith in themselves. I believe them when they say they did not know it was a scam, but that does not change the fact that now our retirement is gone, and we have to factor in these horrific debts that shouldn't exist every time we contemplate doing something completely inane, like spending $2 on brand name oatmeal instead of generic. Please, 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 do not fall victim to things like this. I do not wish this on anyone. Don't keep your finances secret from your family. Always gut check with someone you know in real life and trust when something seems like a good opportunity. As soon as someone proposes any transaction in crypto, it should be a red flag. Just because there is an account, a website, receipts, and paperwork, it does not mean it is real. Update 1. They've filed reports with pretty much every federal agency now. We have a meeting with a detective for our city this weekend. I've looked into the messages. It's just friendly things like memes, commiserating about work and politics, and book recommendations. I don't know if it's worse or better that my spouse is so gullible as to invest with a friend rather than the scammer having to feign romantic interest to get them roped in. There was very little in there about keeping it a secret. They didn't really discuss that at all or entice my spouse to be duplicitous. Just more like my spouse would say that my spouse is going through a rough time and they would talk about that occasionally. I'm having trouble with the fact that the secrecy was almost perfunctory, and little to no effort was even put into thinking about what my spouse was doing or why, and if I should be circled in. There doesn't appear to be malice in any of the statements about me, just genuine worry, but then they kept it from me, almost out of reflex. It's a puzzle. It seems to point to something in my spouse's default state that needs to be changed. Which is what we're working on in therapy. Update 2. When I made that account, and posted about the scam my spouse got caught in, I was so paranoid I did not link it to any of my personal information, nor did I use any of my customary passwords. So, alas, my brain has forgotten the login information. But it is me. You can run my rambling through an AI if you want confirmation. I think I still write the same way. Anyway, because so many of you told me that it helped you that I was so open with what happened to me when my spouse lost our life savings in a pig slaughtering scam. Upwards of $500,000, including loans taken out for the scam fees to withdraw the fake proceeds of the investment. I figure it may help some people to hear some updates. First and foremost, we are still married and together, and planning a vacation to celebrate a milestone anniversary later this year. Of course, the trip is less grand than I envisioned, for obvious reasons, perhaps TMI, but we also resumed having sex and behaving like a normal married couple. Our family planning, once derailed, is also back on track. The spouse had libido problems from the negative self-worth, but pushed them through it. I refused to punish myself with a dead bedroom. Second, my spouse was not cheating, emotionally or physically. We have decided to call what happened financial infidelity, because of the lack of disclosure, even if it was not outright lying. I made my spouse recover all of the messages between them and the person that was the bait for the scam. It was honestly a little funny how thick my spouse was. The bait person, the pictures were real, but the messages were AI, was obviously trying to flirt on several occasions, but it went right over my spouse's head, and they continued to say nice things about me. This was a relief to see. I would have never stayed if the scam involved cheating, even if it was just messages, or bad-mouthing me in any way. My spouse was completely taken in by overtures of platonic friendship and AI-aided conversations of shared interests. This naivety is an issue from a very sheltered religious upbringing, and par for the course for my spouse. Which brings me to the third thing. We have separated finances. Every cent that comes out of our joint account is shared in screenshots. We also separated all finances that are not for shared expenses like utilities in the house.
We agreed to execute a postnuptial agreement that acknowledges all debts associated with the scam. My spouse borrowed money from their family for the fake fees, are my spouse's sole and separate property, and all equity in the house is mine, sans that which exceeds the amount my spouse wasted from the community, i.e., all of our real estate proceeds, a retirement account, and then some.
The figure is large enough that our house's value would have to hit $1 million before my spouse is entitled to anything. Basically, if we divorce, I'm off the hook for everything, and my spouse owes me a hefty sum in perpetuity, which I can execute via a judgment to garnish wages. Fourth, we have not come to an agreement on the loans to my spouse's family. I refuse to pay them off, not 1 cent, because the in-laws all participated in this scam without once checking in with me to see if it was okay that they were funneling around hundreds of thousands of dollars. They have not insisted they be repaid. Yet. That was my condition to staying in the marriage. I'm not chaining myself to people with an IOU who participated in the breach of trust. The spouse agreed. I think my spouse wants to wear me down eventually, but it's not going to happen. I'm far more stubborn than them. I can tell they're already halfway resigned to disappointing their family. I'm not sorry. They made a stupid investment. I did not. They can eat the loss. I already ate far more loss than they did. Loss for all. Get it while it's hot. Fifth, the overwhelming guilt my spouse feels on a daily or weekly basis is a huge bummer. So we've been in couples therapy. The self-flagellation is annoying, and I can basically forget the scam happened until they throw a pity party. I'm fine with them feeling bad, but the increasingly less frequent doldrums also punish me, so we're working on it. I also have massive trust issues that were stirred up from the fallout, no shock there. Another couple in our orbit went through something similar, concealed business debts, and actually did break up, which spooked my spouse considerably. So far, there have been no relapses, and our friend group has been on my side, and helping us get our lives back on track. Sixth, and on to the most positive news. I got a massive raise, which has dug us out of the hole much faster than I thought. Last week our household net worth went positive again. This was very exciting, and we went out to celebrate. It pleases me how fortunate we are that not a lot about our daily existence changed, despite how much money we lost. I still have days where I'm mad and genuinely uncharitable, but they come less frequently with time. My earning potential is very good, and so is my spouse's. I'm making them do some more work to get additional certifications for their career. In 10 years, I think we'll look back at this and see it as a speed bump rather than a mountain. My own family has been a rock through this. My father really stepped up and has been so supportive emotionally. He has been calling my spouse and kindled a fairly close child-parent-like relationship with them, to remind them that they're part of the family. This has been very positive for me, because this happened because my spouse is naive, has issues with self-doubt, and does not have a good, emotionally supportive relationship with their parents. So the doldrums that annoy me are more fleeting the more my father bonds with my spouse and knocks them out of a funk. The spouse's family are emotionally stinted and extremely naive, as you may have guessed, so talking to my father has been good for my spouse. Funny enough, we also uncovered a sordid family of big financial losses. My father's wife, we're not blood related, lost about half of what we did through bad investments in the early 2000s. Apparently there was talk of divorce and bankruptcy at the time, but they stayed together. And, like us, they made too much to go bankrupt. That's been a bit of a bummer, but my credit score thanks me for not declaring bankruptcy. Also, my own grandparents apparently lost close to $10 million in the savings and loan scandals. Goes to show you how many people get caught in these traps. On the law enforcement front, nothing has happened. Trump ripping apart the DOJ and FBI means nobody in the federal government has done anything, although we did get a call from a Secret Service guy that went nowhere. I made the spouse report the scam everywhere, no matter how much I could tell it pained them to relive their own foolishness. Local police tracked the wallets to an address in Africa, so we're basically Saul. The money is gone, as I suspected. They occasionally still IM the spouse, looking for more money, and we dutifully forward the information to law enforcement. I think I will look into getting a federal judgment recorded and on file with what little we know about this person and their aliases, at least before the statute of limitations for fraud runs. I know it's probably futile, but for this amount of money, even a 0.01% chance of getting anything back is worth it, even for the filing fees. I just want a public record of what this evil person did to us. Anyway, that's what has been going on. I wouldn't call it a happy ending, but I did not blow up my life, and we have not lost the house, any cars, or anything like that. Nobody has self-harmed either. I hope that those of you that have been taken by such scams, or will be taken, can gain some measure of peace knowing that there is a way out of this sort of betrayal and financial ruination. Update 3. 2 things happened in the same week that felt like the universe flipping a coin to decide whether to pat me on the head or hit me in the face with a rake. First, we got a letter from the IRS that someone filed a tax return in my spouse's name in March, claiming a refund that did not belong to us. So, yes, the ID they sent the scammers to verify withdrawals is having an exciting second life. I sat at the dining table with the letter in one hand and my oatmeal, generic, a win, in the other, and my spouse just sort of slid down the kitchen cabinet into a puddle on the floor, whisper crying I'm sorry like a haunted Roomba. If you haven't had the pleasure, reporting tax identity theft is a mix of swear words and fax machines. I did not know I owned a fax machine, but apparently every government office keeps one in a bunker with the nuclear football. We filed the affidavit, froze credit across the board, put fraud alerts on everything with a login, and now our real return will be on paper for the foreseeable future like we're reenactors at a colonial village. The upside is that I now have a binder of We Are Not the Thieves, someone else is the thieves documents that would make an accountant weep with pride. On the other side of the coin, we got a call that made me sit down so fast I actually yanked the chair out with me. A real agent, with words that matched the acronyms we put on all those forms months ago, reached out because an exchange in the States got caught, holding a handful of dirty tether linked to the constellation of wallets my spouse's money pinball through. Don't get excited, nobody is backing up a truck to our driveway. But there is a tiny pool of seized funds, and our case number is officially part of the dividing pie. Our slice was less than a used Corolla, but more than an insult. We haven't received it yet, it's still in process, which I assume means it is moving through molasses from one government shelf to another, but it exists, on paper with our name next to it. I took my spouse out for middle shelf sushi to celebrate paperwork. This is who I am now. Therapy is doing its weird alchemy. The self-flagellation is less of a daily performance and more of a once-a-week matinee, and when my spouse starts to go down the I ruined everything staircase, I can actually see them catch themselves on the railing, turn around, and walk back up. The therapist had us do this exercise where we each wrote the story of what happened from the other person's perspective. I expected to read a martyr's soliloquy with a Greek chorus of shame. Instead, I got a very boring spreadsheet of feelings, with columns for assumptions I made and things I did not say out loud. It was oddly effective. We taped it behind our pantry door next to the grocery list, because nothing says we are working on communication like putting it next to toilet paper and onions. We did the post-nup dance for real this time, signatures, notarization, a conference room with a view of a parking lot and a bowl of mints that tasted like despair. My attorney has this pen that looks like a tiny harpoon, and I swear its whole job is to aim at future earnings. My spouse read every line twice, asked the right questions, and signed without a show. We left with a stack of papers that, if dropped on a small dog, would count as an attack. I felt, for the first time since hearing the number, like there was a dam between me and the worst possible outcome. The house is legally mine unless and until the home value is so absurdly high that I can cackle about it, and the debts live on a planet that does not orbit me. That dam also did an interesting thing to my anger. It didn't make it evaporate, it turned it into something with corners. Manageable. Heavy, but movable. The in-law chapter, because there is always an in-law chapter. They finally asked, directly, for a timeline on repayment. Not in a letter from a lawyer or any declarative form, but at brunch, with waffles, like we could pay them in maple syrup. They framed it as we're not demanding, we just need to plan for taxes, and then there was a gentle, pointed reference to how family helps family and how it's all the same pot. Really, it's just about whose ladle is in it. I think you can imagine how well the same pot analogy landed with me, the person who had to watch as everyone dipped their ladles into the pot and poured it into the crypto volcano of doom. I looked at my spouse. My spouse looked at me. And then my spouse, who grew up in a culture where you say sorry to a chair if you bump into it, told their parents no. I will not be paying you back out of our household money. If I pay you back, it will be from my personal account, and I am not committing to a date. They said it steadily, without rage, without begging. The table went quiet and stayed there for a solid minute, which is a long time when there are waffles, and then the conversation lurched into some story about a cousin's dog. We left, and my spouse didn't cry. They were shaky and quiet, but they didn't backpedal, and later that night they said, I didn't die. That is where the bar is, clearing it counts. Work-wise, I got another bump because capitalism sometimes tosses you a treat for not quitting. It was one of those pay adjustments where HR calls it a market correction, like my work was somehow mispriced on a grocery shelf and they finally put me under the right label. Between that and my spouse passing their certification, 3 separate proctored tests that turned our dining room into a shrine to highlighters, our numbers are looking like numbers again. We crossed another little landmark, our emergency fund hit 6 months, and then, like clockwork, the car starter died. We paid for it without drama. That felt like a magic trick. Money goes out, life doesn't crumble, I don't run in circles shrieking. I made a dumb joke at the mechanic about how this was the one investment this year that actually got a return, because now the car starts. He didn't laugh, which is fair. I'm not at my best at 7:30 a.m. Vacation happened. We scaled down the plan from fancy beach with cocktails and hollowed out fruit to mountains and air that smells like pine sap, and it was exactly right. We hiked, badly, like 2 people who have been in an argument with a couch for 12 months, and we sat next to a lake that looked like a screensaver and did the adult version of playing MASH with our life. 5 years, 10 years, the alternate universe where none of this happened, the universe where it happened and we divorced, the one where we had twins by accident, the one where we bought a tiny house and my spouse starts making artisanal jam and I pretend to like it. It was the first time in a long time that we let ourselves imagine futures that weren't just color-coded debt repayment plans. We also conceived on that trip. Or maybe we did. Biology is a mystery. I peed on a stick last week and it was positive. I stared at that stupid little plus sign and felt the floor tilt, that feeling you get when an elevator starts moving and your stomach lags behind. Yeah. I know we're early. I know there are 1,000 ways for joy to evaporate. But I didn't realize how much space the scam had been renting in my body until a new tenant showed up and evicted it, even for a minute. We told my father first. He cried into his coffee and then immediately switched into what do you need, which in his language means I am budgeting in a rocking chair. Since the identity theft thing, the scam ring has tried a new trick, the asset recovery specialist. They emailed my spouse with receipts of the old transactions and a pitch about how they can unlock the account for a nominal fee. My spouse, bless them, brought the email to me with a mischievous expression I have not seen on their face in a while and said, do I get points if I can tell you why this is a scam? We made popcorn and annotated it together. It was like watching a kid ride a bike down the street for the first time without wobbling. We forwarded it to the detective and got a 2-word response that ended in a period. Progress is progress. We did a weird civil thing because I needed to feel like I was doing something besides refreshing a case portal that never updates. Our lawyer filed suit against the aliases we can name and defendants we can't, in our state, and asked the judge to let us serve by email to the addresses the friend used. The judge, who looked like he eats statutes for breakfast, said yes, service accomplished, which felt like winning a spelling bee. The email didn't bounce. No one answered. 30 days passed. Default entered. Judgment signed. I am not naive, it's a piece of paper we can't take to a bank. But it's also a piece of paper that says we are not crazy. We recorded it, because why not, and I slept like I moved a boulder an inch. There was also a brush with bank compliance that was less poetic. My spouse's bank decided, months too late, that sending 6 figures through an exchange maybe should have triggered a conversation. They closed the account for risk, which is a phrase that contains multitudes, and gave my spouse a cashier's check with all the warmth of a dead fish. Payroll got scrambled. There were 2 very unsexy days where I was describing routing numbers while in a pharmacy line, and then it was fine. I bought a ridiculous folder for bank weirdness, because apparently my organizing shtick now is themed binders. There is actually something satisfying about putting each new absurdity into its proper sleeve. The friend whose face started this has a real life. We found her. Well, the person the scammer stole photos from. She's a math teacher in a different country with a dog who wears sweaters. I hesitated a long time on whether to contact her. It felt invasive, and also, what was I going to say? Hey, your face emptied out my retirement. But the idea that I could keep her from being used to do this to someone else finally outweighed the awkward. I sent a careful message to an email address I found on a public page. She wrote back the next day. She was gracious and horrified and also unsurprised, because apparently she gets messages from randos who think they are dating her TikTok. We sent her our police report and a little primer on getting stolen photos taken down when they get reposted. It was the smallest good deed. It still felt like putting a brick into a wall that needs lots of bricks. We also started going to a support group once a month, which is held in a church basement that smells like old hymnals and coffee. The stories are all different versions of ours, which is both depressing and soothing. There's a retired nurse who lost her husband and then lost her savings to a man who worked on an oil rig and just needed to cash a check. There's a 22-year-old who says, "I thought I was too smart for this," in a voice so tiny it breaks me. The thing they all have in common is the secrecy and the shame. My spouse says things in that room that they don't say anywhere else. I can see the difference afterward. They carry the day lighter. I do too. Anger is still my main protein, but it's getting a side of comprehension. Oh, and the detective called last week, out of the blue, with a brief update that was a sentence long and ended with, "We'll keep you posted," which I now realize is law enforcement for "we will not keep you posted unless something explodes." The wallets they traced last winter have squirmed through a new set of mixers, but one hop landed on a U.S. exchange we actually have a dotted line to. Subpoena in process. You could have knocked me over with a feather, but I have learned to put updates like that in a jar and my brain label "do not open until something exists." I am proud of this new jar. It sits next to the jar label "do not imagine spending money that is not real." We still get groceries like we're on a game show where brand names are lava. We still have stupid little moments where one of us says, "Can we afford it?" about a $10 thing, and then we both remember that we're fine and the asking is a ghost talking. I still have days where I look at my spouse and see a blazing neon sign that says this person set a pile of money on fire. But the neon is flickering. On good days, it's off. On very good days, it's replaced by a childlike "we're having a baby?" scrawl in crayon that makes my whole head quiet. We are not out of the woods. There are still thorny bushes and unexploded grief and the possibility that I will have to watch my spouse disappoint their family again and again. There's still a whole percentage of my brain that is a hall monitor for our bank accounts. But new things keep happening that are not disasters. We keep waking up and doing breakfast and taking our vitamins and making plans that don't involve swallowing bile. I keep making the joke that in 10 years we'll laugh about this, and my spouse keeps making the face they make when my jokes are not jokes. Maybe we won't laugh. Maybe we'll just look at each other and nod because we made it to wherever after is. Honestly, that's enough.